Hi, everybody. My name is Dierdre Rae, and so I currently live in London. Before London, I was in Dublin for a little bit, but obviously I am American. I was born in Toronto, and then I've lived in like Missouri, Florida, Boston area. And yeah, but I've been over in Dublin and London for about 6 years now. I've had OCD. So I was diagnosed at 19, but I've had symptoms. I've never like lived a day in my life where I can remember like not having symptoms of OCD. So I'm assuming probably around the age of like 3 or 4, they started, coming to light. Um, my very first symptom that I remember of OCD was my hands being like really raw, like chapped and bleeding because every single time I pet our dog, I felt like I needed to wash my hands every single time. And so from there, and I want to say I was like 4 or 5 at around that time. And so that would have been like my earliest memory, really. From then it kind of proceeded to like checking things. So I would have like these rituals like every single morning, but mostly in the evening where I would have to check every single room in the house, all of the ovens, like every single square inch of my room, all of the closets in the house, like making sure that nobody was hiding like behind the clothes or anything like that. And yeah, I remember when I was really little, like my parents would just be like, okay, Dee, like go do your checks around the house. Like if you want to watch like a movie tonight, because or else you'll go to bed too late. Because it would take me like it started taking me like 30 minutes and then it became like an hour and then it became like sometimes 2 hours. So it just like it kind of depended on the night. If I was fast, I could get it done in an hour, but after that it just wasn't yeah, it wasn't great. But yeah, so my eating disorders kind of started because of my OCD. And it was kind of a way for me to kind of gain control. But funny enough, they did start because I started obsessing over my stomach, and like the bloating and just like obsessing over just my features on my body. And I would like pinch like my body to see how much fat I would have. And this is at like 9 or 10 years old, which obviously isn't like super, super normal to have such intrusive thoughts about your body. And so I kind of started, obviously, at that age, you start hearing about like diet culture and all of those things. So I started just trying to like restrict my food a bit more. And so then around the age of 13, I'd say I had like a full-blown like binge eating disorder where I would be like hiding food, I would be like restricting for days and then binging on like thousands of calories. And this is like, yeah, one like at 13. So I that carried on. So I had about like eating disorders for about 10 years. But about 13, my OCD started to become very, very like scary. Like before that, it was like checks, and I did have like some like fear and all of those things, but I just felt like I had to do it. I didn't even really know like why, but I just knew I had to. And like I knew I was terrified of like my parents dying, or I was terrified of like, like germs and all of that stuff. But it was never like all consuming until puberty-ish time around 13. And when I was 13, it started to really focus on like religion, OCD, scrupulosity, thinking I was a terrible person, and like suicidal ideations were really, really, really strong. Um, I I remember being in like high school, or sorry, high school, middle school, and going into the bathroom and having like panic attacks, like consistently, very consistently having panic attacks, and just like and then the intrusive thoughts of suicide and all of those things. And I would spend after school watching hours, like hours of YouTube videos just on like self-harm, on suicide, on people who were depressed. I remember this is also around the time when like Demi Lovato like went into rehab, and I saw like that she talked about like self-harm and all of that stuff. And I remember being like, oh, like I wonder if that works and stuff like that. And then I started trying to do that and like just to get some relief from like the thoughts that I was feeling like, oh, if I can hurt myself, then like that will stop, the thoughts coming in. And obviously that doesn't work. But that carried on until I was like 19, where like I would just, I would, and it would just be like if you don't, punch yourself in the stomach, then this will happen. If you don't like hit yourself in the face, if you don't like scratch yourself or cut yourself or do anything like that, then I felt like I had to do those things. Um, so around middle school was also the time where I started isolating. I was really, really lucky though, because before I started self-isolating and cutting people kind of off in my life, because if somebody sent me a text that triggered me, an emoji that triggered me, like obviously emoji like later down the line, but I would cut like never speak to that friend again because it would be too intense and I would then emotionally contaminate them. Um, but yeah, before then, I made like a few friends who are still my best friends, like to this day. So I always had them, which was really great, but they were long distance best friends after we moved. And I completely self-isolated from people. And in my head too, because I was so like quote unquote normal, like when I was home, my parents never understood like why I didn't have any friends. They were just like, oh, it's like so strange. But the second I would enter school, school to me was such a contaminated space where I felt like everything that I said, I didn't talk about anything I cared about. I didn't talk about my family. I didn't talk about anything that like mattered to me because I felt like if I talked about it in school, then school would contaminate it and it would ruin it for me. And like my parents would die, or my like I would never get the career that I wanted. I wouldn't get into college. I wouldn't get do all of these things. So I didn't open up or speak to anybody in school. There was one girl who literally in front of the whole class, because like a teacher called on me and I said like the answer or whatever. She goes, "Oh my God, like I thought you were mute." Like in front of everybody. And I was like, "Oh my God." And like nightmare, like absolute nightmare, right? Because I would like literally just bring books like to school or do my homework because that was another thing. Once I hit high school, I never did my homework or any sort of schoolwork outside of school. I purposely like only did it in school. Like I wouldn't speak to anybody and just would do my homework because like even if I had things to do, I would rather go into school early and finish my things than like do it at home because I would put my like backpack in the closet. I would shut the door. I would have to wash, like shower, like wash myself like 2 to 4 times, depending like an even number. And then I would be good and I could not touch that until school the next morning. Also around this time, my morning routine, like every single thing of my life started to become impacted by OCD. So I was like getting up in the morning and I couldn't get up without like it feeling right. So sometimes like I like my alarm would go off, but I'd have to reset my alarm or I'd have to like go up and down on the pillow or I'd have to get up and get down or I'd have to touch my feet a certain way. Like and this is every single morning. Then when I get up, walking through a doorway was an such a thing for me because I'd have to walk through, walk back out, walk through, walk back out until it felt right. There was one evening where I was doing it so much, the only reason I stopped is because I could not stop crying. And I was crying so hard that I was like on the floor, like sobbing, could not like continue walking back through the door frame because I had been doing it. I honestly can't even tell you for how long I was doing it. I just knew I was so stuck just going back and forth and could not stop the compulsion because it just didn't feel right. Um, After that, yeah, so then, brushing my teeth, an ordeal, putting on makeup, an ordeal, driving, the intrusive thoughts I would get, and the comfort I would also sometimes get of just thinking of the thoughts of what if I just drove off the road? The thoughts would stop, everything would stop. And I was also in a place where no one in my life knew any of the thoughts that were going on in my head because I thought that if I spoke about it, then that would mean that it would come true. And at this time, at like high school, the middle school, high school, I basically had a teacher that I don't know if you guys know what PSR is or CCD. It's basically like Sunday school, but on a Monday. My religious like scrupulosity kind of really came to a head then when she told me that I could become possessed if I didn't do my homework or didn't behave and like didn't do all of these things. So I obviously took that piece of information and was terrified about becoming possessed for like years. And then I just kept on adding to it. I was like, oh, well, what if this happened? What if this happened? What if this religious thing happened? And what if this religious person like came and like I'm even like uncomfortable still, like sometimes talking about like certain elements of religion just because it had been like the worst thought that you could possibly think, I thought. Like the scariest things, the scariest intrusive images that would pop into my head, they were just like all consuming. Um, but so that was kind of all around high school area and like no once again nobody really knew. They would see me doing little compulsions, but because I was diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety and they also like depression, like all of those things, they were just like, oh, it's just that, like it's just that, because obviously the stereotype with OCD, like nobody would even think twice because once again I was not I was not an organized girl. Like I'm very much not type A. I would say like my personality, especially now, is very type B. But yeah, so it was just nobody knew. But I was in therapist after therapist trying to figure out what was wrong, but I wouldn't work with the therapist because I'd be like, I'm not going to tell you because if I tell you, then it's all going to come true, right? So then I go to college and I felt such relief because I didn't have all of these rituals that I had to do and I didn't have all of these contaminated areas in the house and I didn't have like all of these things. So I felt very free. And it only took probably about 2, 3 weeks before I started having rituals and I started like having places in the dorm that I couldn't go and I started having people that I couldn't talk to. So then college started shrinking for me again and I didn't feel as excited and happy to be there. It just became a scary place then. So I remember going home for like Christmas and I didn't want to go back. Like I was like, it's too much. Like I don't, it's like the same thing over and over and over again. It's like when I moved to Florida it happened again. When I moved to Boston, it happened again. So during that time, I thought it was the school. So I transferred schools. I think I transferred to University of New Hampshire. I was there for 2 weeks before I had a complete and utter panic attack meltdown, just physically was like inconsolable. And that was kind of like I say it's like my it was my breaking point, and I could completely go into that. I actually did a YouTube video with NOCD kind of talking about that entire situation, but it basically I saw something that triggered me, and obviously when you have OCD. And I have magical thinking OCD. So I'm like, okay, if you see this, then this will happen. And I remember being like, if I see this number, that means that you're going to hell no matter what you do in your entire life. Like you're done. That's it. And I saw and I was like, if I see this number on a license plate and I saw that number on a license plate and I just like I felt I was like, oh my God, I'm like never gonna see my family again. I'm never gonna be able to get out of this no matter how many good things I do. Like this is it. Like I'm done. Like this is my life. It's over. So that was truly how my everything, every part of me reacted. And so I dropped out of college actually when I was like getting all of my stuff and packed up all my stuff to go home. I popped a tire on the way out because I was doing a driving compulsion because my OCD was so bad. I was literally turning around the car. I was revving the engine and slowing it down. I was purposely braking and then putting like it. Like I'm shocked the car didn't break, to be honest. Like the things that I was like I had felt like I had to do in the car. Um, but I remember going home and like I nobody was there so I was my uncle was like probably like an hour away and I remember kind of like walking back and forth like talking to my mom on the phone because I felt like I couldn't go into the house and my mom was like just go into the house. I'm like I can't go into the house. So I walking back and forth and of course like while I'm walking my safe space is getting smaller. So I'm like okay I can't walk here because you saw this dark spot and if you cross this dark spot then this will happen or whatever. So like I got to the point where I'm just stuck outside of the house and I can't move. Like there I know like my body will not let me move. So I'm calling my mom, and my mom gets somebody else on the phone. Like we had a neighbor whose daughter has OCD. She calls me and she basically tells me, yep, you're just gonna have to learn to deal with it. It never goes away. I was like, you're joking. Mind you, I'm stuck. I'm standing outside the house, probably 2 hours at this point. Like I literally can't move. And so she's like, yeah, you're like, there's nothing you can do. You just kind of got to get over it. And I was like, oh my God. So then I was like, cool. And then I start having a meltdown, like an absolute panic attack. And my uncle comes and picks me up and drives me to the hospital because I am like inconsolable. There's nothing. And then I kind of snap and I'm just like I remember just staring straight ahead and just like not being able to like think about anything. And then I go to the emergency room, they give me medication. I remember speaking to myself. I'm like, I'm so like my thoughts are so loud in my head. I think I'm schizophrenic. Like I truly I'm like I somebody needs to medicate me, put me away. Like I'm hearing so many voices, but it was literally just my OCD. So I end up my mom she went through all of these things and she found like this treatment center in Massachusetts for people literally with OCD. It's called McLean Hospital and they literally have like a section called the OCDI. And I was in an outpatient program for about a month there and I learned about like bunch of different disorders because it wasn't OCD specific. And then I got to this mental health hospital like the OCDI. And it was like, and I say this all the time because I think it's just funny. It was the first place that I ever felt normal, which I think is hilarious because it's like you're in a hospital for like mental health. And I'm like, God, I feel so good about this right now. But Yeah, so I remember being there and having like being so feeling so broken that I remember, and I didn't tell anybody this at the time, but I was like, it like if this doesn't work, I basically said that I like in my head I was like, you can be done, and you don't have to be here anymore. And I made that promise to myself that like if this doesn't work, then you can do that kind of thing. But the deal is you have to give every single thing that you have to this program, or else that's not an option because you didn't do it. So, and because when I say I physically, there was no lower that my state could have been. They put me on some medication, thank God, because Jesus. But so then I started like really, really working hard. And I had a therapist at the treatment center literally tell me, I've never seen somebody who is as bad as you were, get better as quick as you did. Like I've never seen that before in my entire life. And mind you, this man like works at like an OCDI, like he works there like for a living. So obviously he sees like a bunch of people with OCD. And I was like, okay. I was like, look at me. But it was because I was doing, this is where I learned about exposure therapy. And I just started doing like exposure after exposure after exposure. And my thing too, I was looking at what other people were doing. I was like, okay, this person said no to their therapist. Like, I'm not going to do that exposure. And so I made a promise. I was like, if somebody asks me to do something, I have to do it no matter what they say, no matter how scared I am, I have to do it, kind of thing. I almost, funny enough, and this is, I don't know if if this is something I should recommend, but I remember almost using my OCD to, as a compulsion to do my exposures. I'm like, if you don't do this, then this, like, if you don't do this exposure, kind of thing. And so I don't do that anymore, like at all. But like in that time, I couldn't do anything without a compulsion. I felt like there was nothing in my life. I didn't know how to do anything without compulsions. So I remember starting to do that. And I remember then feeling so much better, like within a month. I was like, because I was there for about a month. And I remember being better already than I'd ever been in my life, just with a month of like full nonstop, every single day, every single moment of exposure therapy. Like I did not rest, kind of thing. And then I remember I went home, or I was like, kind of like discharged, and then my eating disorder started kind of flaring up again, but it wasn't OCD related, or sorry, it kind of was OCD related this time, but it was more so to cope with the fact that I had completely stopped taking the medication because I thought I was fine. So I stopped taking the medication, didn't tell the doctor, didn't tell anybody about that. And then I started becoming, I guess I haven't really talked about the eating disorders, but in college I had like more of like orthorexia where I like didn't eat anything. But so that would happen for about like a year. And then before that, but throughout the rest of the, oh my God, I can't speak. The rest of the 10 years, I had like a severe binge eating disorder. And like the purging element, I would exercise. I had an exercise addiction for years and like would work out for 1 to 2 hours in the morning and 4 to 5 hours after classes, like in college. Like it was insane, the things that, and like the calorie counting, I could tell you every single thing, like what calories that thing had, like every single food. You bring the food, I could tell you exactly how many calories it had, kind of thing. Um, but at this point, I had never thrown up. And then I remember coming out of the McLean hospital and deciding that I was still like in a state where I wasn't mentally like okay. And I remember like kind of I can't remember because I started drinking by myself at this point as well, which it was not a great space to be in. But I remember then like making myself throw up, and then from there I didn't stop. So then I went back to college. I was not ready to go back to college in any way, shape, or form. To be fair, I should have waited for another year. I'm glad I did it now looking back, but I should not have been there. I should not have been there. And I was drinking too much. I was doing my exposures. My OCD was kind of the best it had ever been, but everything else was kind of not falling into place. Like I still had the depression, I still had the eating disorders and all of this stuff. So I was trying to like work through all of these things. And I also remember working so hard on my OCD that I was so tired and I didn't want to work on my eating disorder. So I almost purposely didn't because it was still giving me that like dopamine boost of I'm doing something right, because OCD is a disorder that's so rooted in control that I was like, I can control this. So I just kept on controlling that. But anyway, so it took me, I studied abroad in Ireland, and that was when like my bulimia was at its all-time highest. but I was the happiest it had ever been, and my OCD was the best it had ever been. So, but I just couldn't shake the binge eating, which now I realize I think it was like it was a habit. And I just realized that after 10 years, it wasn't just going to go away. So I was like, okay, now I'm going to fix this because everything else I've sorted. I've sorted the depression, I've sorted the anxiety, I've sorted the OCD. I need to fix this eating disorder because my face was swelling up. From throwing up, I had blood, like not clots, what are they? Spots, like all around my eyes, like every single time. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna get better for this. And I started reading self-help books about like binge eating. And I read one that like really resonated with me. It was like Brain Over Binge, and it just clicked with me. And I remember having my last binge, and then I started, funny enough, the Instagram that I have now, where I started talking about, you know, like I didn't talk about my mental health in the beginning though. I just was giving advice without saying anything that I had kind of been through, but I didn't feel like a hypocrite anymore because I felt like I had cured everything. At this point, I also didn't meet any requirements for like mental illness. So this is sorry, after the binge eating, I'd say about like 6 months after that, I wouldn't have met any requirements for like mental illness, for OCD, for anxiety, for depression, for any of that stuff. So I got to that point, and I was at that point, I probably stayed at that point for like year or two. And then I met my ex. And that dating, I'd never dated. I think I'd been on like one date and maybe two. And I remember this was like a whole new element for my OCD. And so I started dating him. I started mixing up the signs, my exposures. I still was actively doing my exposures. And whenever I felt scared, I would go towards it. And this specific person, like, just he kept on making me really scared. And I remember that if I was scared, it was always my fault. Like, I'm the reason that, I make myself scared. It's my OCD. So I just kind of went towards that. I went towards him. And then I was with him for about a year and a half. He ended up being very emotionally abusive, and he got like physical at certain points. And then I was like, okay, this isn't my OCD. This is you. But being in that relationship, in that toxic environment, the last thing I wanted to do was my exposures. So my exposures started to slip, and my OCD started getting worse. But it never got as bad as it was when I was in 2017, when I was 19 years old. It never got as bad as then. And so when I broke up with him, I had to redo almost everything. So I was like, okay, got to get back to exposure therapy, got to get back to this, got to do all this stuff. And I remember it feeling really overwhelming. But then I remember once I started, I started to feel so much better. Like the more exposure therapy I did, the quicker I saw like the results. And I also remember so vividly too, if I did one like compulsion and I gave in to one compulsion intentionally, it was a domino effect from there. So I really, really, really remember that that was a consistent theme. If I did one once again intentionally, because I to this day I still sometimes do compulsions. I'm like, oh my God, like, no, 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 like, kind of thing. And it's like just instinctual. But if it was intentional, the dominoes would fall, and I would feel like it was. I always say that people with OCD are addicts because it's like we have to do it. And it's like when you relapse, like luckily it's not like alcoholic relapse like that, but it's still it's very intense, and you feel like that's like your comfort zone. Like this, like I always say that people's comfort is like if people's comfort level is here, somebody with OCD is here. So it's like when you're up here, when you're out of that comfort zone, it can feel uncomfortable. So when you go back to your base, this is what feels comfortable. This is why it feels safe, but it's not safe. Like up here is what's safe, but it's just not comfortable because we're not used to it. So I felt like when I did that, then I was in my comfort zone, and like I would want the dominoes to keep falling and all of that stuff. But yeah, and then after that, after I broke up with my ex, I moved to London. I started like to this day, go on dates, which probably isn't great, but like I do go on dates sometimes specifically for if the person like not scares me like in a horrible way, but like I've emotionally contaminated them. Like my first date this year, the guy I met on Hinge, and like he was my first kiss of the year as well. And like I remember like afterwards being like, the rest of my dating life is gonna suck because I've kissed him and he's emotionally contaminated and he's gonna ruin the rest of my like dating, whatever. And like how has it been great? Not really, but like it's not been horrible. So, but it's still like things like that where I'll purposely go on like, and if I feel like I've emotionally contaminated them, and I'm like in a spot now where I'm so much better at deciphering, is he emotionally contaminated, or is do I actually just not like him? And because I've been so open about it recently, like I've had people in my life being able to like help me with that and all of that stuff. But now for the last 2 years, I once again don't meet any like requirements to have OCD. So it's like I live most days with the very like I don't really get anxiety much anymore. Like I have like a random compulsion, but it doesn't really like affect me much. Or if I have an intrusive thought, I'm able to like very much like dismiss it and go through that. But it's because to this day, I'm so intentional. Every single time I feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, I do it. So if I'm ever scared about something, I'll make sure like if I get anxiety, I've kind of program my brain to think that that's a good thing and go towards that. So like even last like I was able to do a solo trip, like literally a full like lap around the world, which is something I couldn't leave the house. Like at 19, there was no way I could leave the house without having a panic attack. And I was able to do that by myself and like meet up with friends that I was able to make and all of these things from like being in London, being in Dublin, like all of that stuff. So I'm now at a point where I just feel so like I don't know, I just feel very at peace and like looking back, I almost feel like yeah, I actually had a moment like the other day just being like, God, I can't believe how bad it was versus how good it is now. Like, because I always say, like, my absolute worst day, like now, absolute worst day, I wouldn't have even been able to dream that that was possible for me. On my absolute best day with OCD when I was like 13 to 19. I didn't know that what I have now existed. And so yeah, proof that one girl wrong who my parents' friend who was like, you're just gonna have to live with it. It's like that's not it. Like, yeah, you technically still have like a little bit of things, but it doesn't really cause you much anxiety if you are like so intentional with once again like the exposures and like with consistent therapy and with talking to people and opening up when you're struggling and all of that stuff. But yeah, so that's a bit of like my story. I hope that like, that's kind of like all of the things in a quick way, but yeah,
Wow. I mean, that gave me so much hope. And like I'm in a pretty good place with my OCD, and that even gave me so much hope for like the life that you can live despite having that. And I'm sure everyone listening feels the exact same. So thank you so much for being open and sharing your story. Wow. You're incredible. And I love how you really gave it your all in ERP therapy. I think we sometimes people don't give it their all and think, oh no, like this isn't going to work for me, you know?
yeah,
And, but you are proof that like you were at a really bad spot, you know? You were very severe, had a lot of different OCD themes, and you were able to give it your all and really turn things around. So that's just incredible. And thank you.
thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm stoked about it, obviously.
I
But
love it. I think it's just a beautiful reminder. I think hope is so important for people that have any mental conditions, especially OCD and eating disorders. Is like hope is important. You know, once you get that piece of hope where it doesn't have to be like this forever,
yeah,
that can really keep you going. So.
yeah.
How about we get into some Q&A time? And so all of you guys that are listening, feel free to continue putting questions in the Q&A box for Deirdre. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the questions and Dee will answer them. So first question is, thank you for sharing your story. Everything you've shared is so relatable. I don't wish OCD on anyone. My question is about the past, which is such a struggle for me. But how did you get over knowing you've missed out on so many opportunities as a kid or teen because of OCD shutting you out from the world?
I literally was just talking to my mom about this like the other day because to this day I'm like I still like every opportunity that has like been presented to me I try to take because I feel like I've missed out on so much in my life. But to be honest, like I've tried to rewire my brain into feeling like the time that I've missed is a blessing for my time now because of how appreciative I am. Like I remember like sometimes I'm around people and like I can see that they don't appreciate the life that they have, like and how good their life is. And like they haven't been through, the mental illness stuff that, like I have. And I'm just like, I can't believe how lucky I am. Like every single day, instead of like whenever I think, because I do get into those headspaces of like, oh my God, the friends I could have made, the experience they could have had, the moments and the memories that have been tainted because of how horrific that I felt is like where now it like I kind of said before, it's like led me to do so much more now than, some of the people in my life where I'm like, okay, like if somebody asks me to, or if I want to do something, I'm like, of course I'm going to do it. Like I've missed out on so much already. Like, why wouldn't I take that opportunity? Why wouldn't I take that next step? Like, why wouldn't I apply for that job? Like nothing, I almost use it in a way of like where I'm almost so scared of missing out again that I'm more intentional with who I spend my time with. Like I do not spend a moment with somebody I don't care about or that I don't like and that aren't kind and that aren't nice because like once again I don't want to waste any of my time. My biggest pet peeve now is people like wasting my time. So I'm like, okay, like what am I gonna do? I'm gonna only hang out with people that I truly value. I'm only going to give my time to people that truly matter. I'm only going to do the things that I really truly want to do. If something's not making me happy, I'm not going to stay here anymore because I've learned in the past that like regret is so much more intense than not just taking the chance. Because even if you fail, like failing is means that you at least tried, you know? And so back in the day, I wasn't really like I wasn't trying like I was trying to survive, but I wasn't like trying new things. And so now I almost that's kind of how I like view it now. I really try to look back and like look back to help me push me forward, like have that kind of thing to be my motivation, to be appreciative, to feel lucky, to go and do things like because it's a tough thing, but every single time I just try to like almost like reverse that thought every single time it comes in to being like, okay, but look what it's let you do now. Or as motivation, if I do get scared about something, being like, well, all the things, but like back then, you didn't do that, so do it.
Mm, that's such a solid answer. That I needed to hear that. I'm sure a lot of people here needed to hear that too. That was awesome. Thank you. All right. Next question. Someone said, thank you for that, Dee. You're an inspiration. When you were first diagnosed with OCD, how did you open up about it and tell friends and family about your diagnosis? Not many people fully understand OCD, and it can be so difficult to try and open up and tell people what you're going through.
Yeah, so I never had to open up to my family, luckily, because well, not luckily, because they were like, oh my God, like what is happening? So they were in the therapy office like with me while they were learning while I was learning. So I was lucky where I didn't have to open it up to them in that way. But I remember like I've been on I've definitely told you this before, Brenna, where I've been on a date where a guy literally goes to swear to God, he literally says, he goes, you seem like you have OCD to me. Mind you, I was not exhibiting one symptom. Okay. So I was like, what makes you say that? And he's like, you just seem so like organized. You were so on time. You seem so put together. And I was like, well, firstly, thank you. But like, secondly, I'm like, do you know that that's not what OCD is, right? I can't even tell you because of like my Instagram and being so like open about it, it's taught me that every single person has really gone through something, right? So the first time I posted about my eating disorder, I cried. Like I thought I was so embarrassed. I thought that people were going to think about me differently. I thought that nobody was going to want to talk to me. I thought nobody was going to date me. I thought nobody was going to want to be my friend. And I hadn't even touched on the OCD, the things that because I was the most embarrassed about my OCD experience. And the only thing I got from opening up about my eating disorders and my OCD were other people coming to me and opening up about it,
Yeah.
that they had also experienced it. The strongest people I have ever like met, the people that I would have never thought have been through that kind of stuff came to me and were like, I'm so glad you said that. I've literally been struggling with this for years, or like things like that. And I'm like, no, no way. Like, are you kidding me right now? Like, not, I've literally not gotten every single person I've opened up to, because I've done it on dates before as a just to for me, just as like, because like why not? And because OCD isn't like as it's stereotyped, but not as like stigmatized. Like where if I say I have OCD, they're just gonna think, oh, she's just clean or whatever like that. But I will like intentionally sometimes drop it just to see what they say, just to see
Yeah.
what they do. And like it's more like fun for me now. I don't typically get into like everything. Like I'm not trauma dumping on my date. Oh my God. But I'm just like, oh, it's like, very interesting disorder. Like you should look it up. That is my go-to line is I always say OCD because I truly believe this too, is like OCD is fascinating and it's such an interesting disorder. Like I always like encourage people like you should look it up because your mind's gonna be blown. Like from what you think it is to what it actually is. Like look up on YouTube. Like your mind's gonna just completely change. But the one thing I can say is everybody has gone through something at some point in their lives. And even though there is a stigma, like talking about your personal experience of like what you've gone through. I personally have never met anybody who has like rejected me in any way, shape, or form. It's just like almost an exposure therapy of starting to tell more people. And even if you do get a bad egg who does say that doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep on opening up. That's not like a closed door. That's still somebody like that's somebody you just don't really want to give as much time to and focus on more so other people, I'd say.
Totally. That's so spot on. And I feel like, was it hard at first, I guess, exposing yourself to that, like on dates? Were you ever really nervous of like opening up to people about that? Or were you just like, we'll see what happens?
To be honest, I've always been like a let's see what happens because I've
Yeah.
been so open about it on my
Yeah.
Instagram and I had so much exposure therapy of talking about my mental health on my Instagram and having such a good feedback about it and having and also realizing that there are so many people in my life who've been like who've been like I think I might have OCD and have like gotten tested. Like I get being like, "Oh, I didn't even realize that that was a symptom." And it's not as like to me like mental health is not stigmatized like in my head. I'm like I don't know why it would be, so I go in expecting that from other people as well, and if that's not the case from them, then like I've actually I've never had a person not want to at least try to understand where I'm coming from, especially from coming at them at like a very vulnerable like state. And
Totally.
especially if I'm on a date and be like, what do you think about it? They're like,
It's a I love that. Thanks for answering that. Okay. How did your OCD and eating disorder interact with each other? Did you ever feel like they were sort of fueling each other?
Yeah, so my OCD, I would say my eating disorder was completely started because of my OCD. I don't know
Yeah.
if I had one if I didn't have OCD because it was so rooted in control and like seeing like how many calories I could have, doing the research that I like was fascinated by the research and all of that stuff. And so every single aspect of my eating was almost controlled. Like you can't have this or this will happen. You can't do this because this will happen, kind of thing, like the magical thinking element of it. And the almost like I'd have to eat at a certain time. I could only eat certain foods. I could, and it made me feel so good after like being if I followed that. And then when I binged and lost control, then I would have my meltdown, like my meltdown, and I would start it all over again. So it'd just be like this cycle after cycle. And then after 10 years, that cycle is very much a habit. And so it was hard to break, even though I fixed my OCD, but it completely started due to my OCD, and it had a bunch of different like levels to it because sometimes it was binging, sometimes it was purging, sometimes it was more so orthorexia, starving myself, the exercise addiction, every single aspect of it. My OCD fueled completely.
Yeah. Interesting. So you said obviously you went to McLean for treatment, did ERP therapy for your OCD. Did you do therapy for your eating disorders?
Um, so I went to a nutritionist once,
Mm.
but other than that, funny enough, no,
Yeah.
I did funny enough, I did exposure therapy. I started being like, okay, after I read the book, The Brain Over Binge, I was like, wait, I can totally implement exposure therapy into this. I implement exposure therapy into everything in my life. And I was
Right.
like, okay, like I'm terrified of eating cake. So I had cake every single day for lunch, after lunch for literally 2 months every single day. I would could be and because I was like, I need to take this off the pedestal. And like I was terrified of eating it. So every single day I ate it. And now I can eat cake when I haven't had cake. I can't remember the last time I had cake because it's not like I'm like if I want it, I'll have it. If not, it's like
Right.
not like a like I need it. I need to have it or I'm terrified. And like now I'm like, or wait, not that I need to have it, but like I'm terrified of it, but I really want it. So
Right. Right. Okay. So question now, since you are a coach, right? And you do help people with nutrition and fitness and all of that. How do you make sure that stays like in a healthy spot given your background of OCD and eating disorders?
like how my OCD stays in a healthy spot.
Yeah, like how with what you're doing for work now and your career, since it is focused in like fitness and stuff, or a lot of a big part of it is how do you make sure that that stays in a healthy way, I guess.
Honestly, I do like if I start to feel sad for like a length of time, I do like an almost like a self audit.
Mm.
I'm just like, okay, firstly, like, am I eating enough? Like, am I eating the right foods? Am I like exercising and moving my body enough? Like, I almost like go through almost like a mental checklist of everything that I'm doing. Am I eating too much caffeine, like drinking too much caffeine? I'm like all of those things, like because like the things that trigger my OCD are typically those things. So sometimes when my OCD is like feeling like it's gearing up, like I'm like, okay, do I have a trip coming up? Okay, that might be the case for that. So like let's do some exposure therapy with that. Or like is it because like I'm eating too much like chocolate or whatever? Because some sugar is like I'm very like sugar caffeine sensitive. So it's like those things can like go whoop, whoop really quickly. So I'll always just like self audit in that way. I'm like, have I been lacking on my exposures? Have things been so tough recently, just like with like stress or with work or with anything like that? Like that I need to intentionally start doing exposures because right now I don't intentionally do them. If they come up, then I do them. But sometimes if like things are just really stressful and things are just feeling overwhelming, I don't just let that like just I don't try to push through. I try to like feel my feel like that's actually the biggest thing I can say is allowing yourself to feel sad and feel and not feel guilty about being sad because I feel so lucky now. I'm like I shouldn't feel sad because look at where I am like now. How could I possibly be sad? But I'm like no, you like sadness is a way is like your body's way of like coming full circle to be happy again. So I allow myself to feel sad. I give myself that self-care and I analyze exactly what I need to do from this point and what I need to remove and add to like kind of move forward then.
Wow, yeah. That I love that allowing yourself to feel the different emotions to it's like a all full circle thing. I love that. Actually haven't heard that from anyone and I think I'll remember that for a long time. So thanks for saying that. It's like a good reminder that there's no bad emotion,
Yeah.
like you're going to feel anxiety with OCD. You're going to feel that, but the anxiety, even though it feels bad and it feels like you want to get rid of it, anxiety cannot hurt you. It's just a feeling. And if we treat it like that with our OCD or eating disorders, and we treat it to where it's like, okay, this is anxiety. I'm going to live my life despite feeling like this, despite feeling horrible. We get that power back from it. Uh,
Yeah. Because
so,
I always say to him, like, healing isn't like being better doesn't mean like the absence of anxiety. It just means that like you're able to not let anxiety stop you from doing what you want to do.
right,
So those type of
right. I think that's been huge in my journey too, the past couple of years, because I did ERP therapy intense a couple years ago, but I would still sometimes get flare-ups and sometimes they would last a while, and I would fixate on how terrible I felt all the time. And I would not do the things I wanted to do or avoid people because I felt so bad. But once I started being like, let's actually change this and live my life despite feeling bad, let's see what happens.
yeah.
And over time, it made me a lot stronger and just able to live a full life.
Yeah. And I feel too that people think that they need to be better, like the only way to be better is to be better by tomorrow. And like that's not the case. It's sometimes literally as simple as just like, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna implement a walk in the morning and I'm just gonna do that for like 2 weeks and just see how I feel. And then like the next week you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna add like a vegetable into my lunch and like I'm just gonna see how that makes me feel. It's like it doesn't need to be, I always say like the slower you go, the faster you see results. Sometimes on certain like if you're like already in your except for the exposure therapy. The more exposure therapy you do, the faster you're going to see results. But on like just like eating disorder wise, on like facing fears, like those type of things. Sometimes like adding things slowly when you're in a really dark space, it just builds up.
Mm, that was solid. Thanks. Okay, how do you deal with perfectionism and shame? They both seem to be common in OCD and eating disorders.
The shame, kid you not, it was talking about it more. It was opening up about it more and not feeling as embarrassed. Like because yeah, like I said, the more I opened up about it, the more I realized that other people were experiencing the same things. But that also doesn't mean like trauma dumping on people. It's like opening up to people who you trust and like that who you value. And then as for like the perfectionism, um, I use this tip for everything too, is like I just start. Like I'm like the only promise I make to myself is like to start. And like once I start, like whether that's like a workout or a paper or something like that, it's like like that's the goal is I just start it. And once like am like continuing it, I'll like finish it. Like, let's say a paper, because like oh my gosh, I can't speak. For perfectionism, I remember like my OCD would affect my writing a lot and like certain like words that I could use or couldn't use and stuff like that. And I didn't want to send it in because it wasn't good or like all of that stuff. But I was like, okay, I'm just gonna finish it. And like I almost sometimes would purposely do things bad. And then like not like for grades, obviously, but like I'm talking about like I'm jumping around, but like I would sometimes purposely do things bad to it's almost like rejection therapy where you're like, okay, if so what? Like if perfection is like I knew a girl at the OCDI who couldn't wear like who couldn't go outside of the house without makeup. So it's like going outside of the house, going to the grocery store and purposely forcing yourself to go without makeup, or doing something like I'm trying to think, or like wearing sweats if you're not the type of person to wear sweats or like things like that. To be fair, like I actually haven't like the perfectionism side of things, I haven't experienced that like too much, so I don't want to like be like, oh, do this. I haven't like personally like really experienced it, but the shame talking about it is like the most important. I honestly think that's the most important thing. And it genuinely exposure therapy in itself. And
Yeah.
surrounding yourself with people who have OCD and like whether that's OCD support groups, whether that's like online, whether that's in like NOCD, like all of that stuff, like having that supportive like community helps lessen that shame because it makes you feel less alone because OCD is a disorder that purposely tries to make you feel as isolated as possible in your own mind and make you feel like nobody else is going to understand because it gaslights you more than anybody else will.
Yeah, e- exactly. And some people have, I feel like a lot of people with OCD have really taboo, intrusive thoughts. And it's like, there's no way I can tell someone about this. Like, I don't even want to tell my therapist about it, you know? Uh, so I think more awareness and people talking about it and their intrusive thoughts, which I think over the past few years, at least on social media, I've seen a lot more talk about it, which I think is great because
Yeah.
it allows people the space to feel like, okay, I'm not the only one that's had these really scary thoughts.
No, 100%, 100%. And like I went through most of my talking about OCD without talking about my intrusive, like exactly what I was going through. It wasn't honestly until I think this year or like late last year where I started telling people exactly what my OCD was. I more so was educating people on OCD and what OCD caused me to do. I never really opened up about my intrusive thoughts and what exactly I was thinking until recently. That's been like new for me, to be honest. It's more so been about like the OCD, like the disorder in
Right.
general, like the different types and all like related to other people too. So it doesn't feel as like all eyes are on you and like, oh, you're crazy or you're doing this or like, oh, why would you think that? That's insane. It's like almost saying it to people in a way of like, this is what because we're like a community, right? It's like this is
Yeah,
what we go through. It's not just me. Like I'm not the only one.
that's good. Love that. Okay, this will probably be our last question. What level of fear slash distress have you experienced in relationships, and how have you applied or misapplied ERP in this area, which you've kind of talked about before?
Yeah, like the for my last relationship, like the scaredest I'd been like he was just he was very intimidating when we broke up. So it's like when we were living together. So my OCD was like at its complete height. He was very like he was very aggressive. He like charged at me, tried to hit me, like all of these things, and I was just like, oh my God. So that would have been like my peak, right? My absolute peak. And sorry, wait, what was the second half of the question?
It was how how have you applied or misapplied ERP in this area?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the relationship, I remember it was like a whirlwind kind of thing as well. Like we had dated and then I ended it because he was making my OCD bad. And I was like, you
Yeah.
know what? There's a little bit too many red flags here. So I'm just gonna like, put a pin in this. We stayed semi-friends for about a year. And then I remember still really liking him though. I really did like him. And then, it was just one day, like I remember doing like something nice for him and he was just like you're it, kind of thing. And I remember being on the phone with him, and because we were long distance then at this time, and he was just like, when you know, like, I just know, like, I know you're it. And I remember being like, yeah, but like, I don't know. Like, I really don't know. And I remember having like this shooting pain of like anxiety, being like, I don't know. But I was like, no, 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 anxiety. Okay, wait, no, this is good. Go towards this, And I wasn't like what I should have done is should have been in therapy because I was out of therapy at this time. And I should have looked back and been like, hey, why did you end it in the first place? What were the signs? What were these things? I also had like when I moved in with him, it was like 2 weeks after we actually started dating, because I was in the States and he was in Ireland. And he was like, just move in with me. And I was like, sounds good. And I would go in and he would make me feel so bad about myself. But in my head, I was like, oh, like because because I have such a great family, like the only person that really made me feel bad about myself was me, like my OCD and like, doing those things. And so I was like, okay, I must be doing something wrong. And then he would use my OCD triggers against me. And I'd just be like, okay, like once again, and I would just completely internalize it. And that was my biggest mistake, was thinking that it was all my fault. And because when you have OCD and you have scrupulosity OCD and you think you're secretly this horrible person, you truly believe that they can't do any wrong and that it's genuinely all you. So I didn't talk about it either. I didn't talk to anybody about it. Like didn't talk to anybody about my OCD back in the day. Lesson learned. But I would say if somebody is actively making you anxious and not secure and making your OCD symptoms worse, and like obviously in the beginning of dating, like your OCD symptoms will be worse because there's so much uncertainty. But when you're in a relationship, you like like it wasn't relationship OCD where I was like, oh, like, is this
Right.
like, do I have feelings? Am I attracted to him? All this stuff. It was like looking for reasons to stay. Like I was trying to find reasons to stay. And like when I should have been accepting the reasons of why I needed to go. So I was just kind of going towards the anxiety, but he was the one causing it. I wasn't the one producing the anxiety. And I should have been able, or not, I should have been able to, because obviously I didn't know at the time. But like now I would be able to more so be like, okay, is this stemming from me, or is like, what's the reason? Like put blame on somebody else sometimes.
Right. Yeah, that's so good about how it's like, are you the one causing the anxiety? Like, is it your OCD? Is it your anxiety, or is it the other person? And that's good. That's good. And well, Dee, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story and for opening up. Will forever remember this. So thank you. And I think everybody really enjoyed it as well. And before we go, I want to tell everybody listening about a really awesome opportunity we have at NOCD right now. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. And if you're listening to this, you could be really struggling with OCD, or you don't even know what you're struggling with, but all you know is that you're struggling. I've been there. We're actually doing our clinical experts, including Dr. Patrick McGrath and other clinical leaders here at NOCD. They're offering free one-on-one consultation calls through the end of this month. And there's limited opportunities, so take it while you can. And it's just 15 minutes where you can not only talk to an OCD specialist, but they're experts in the field. And this is your time to ask questions, to ask what OCD looks like, what treatment looks like, what diagnoses look like, what living with OCD looks like. And they feel really, really passionate about doing this, especially Mental Health Awareness Month. And so if you are struggling, just know that one, you can get better. There's hope for you. And two, it's great to learn about different opportunities and different, if you have OCD, if you don't, what therapy looks like, what specialized OCD therapy looks like. It's just a good opportunity to learn. So in the chat, we put a link in the chat where you can book a free 15-minute one-on-one consultation call with one of our OCD experts here at NOCD. So feel free to book your call. They are really passionate about this and are really looking forward to talking to you. So that their link is in the chat again for you. But ultimately, Deirdre, you're the best. And you're such an inspiration to everyone. This was recorded, so you will be getting an email with this recording, hopefully within the next few days, week. So you guys can listen to this or share it with your friends. But yeah, again, thank you guys so much. And Deirdre, if you want to share your social media so people can listening can check it out. Ours is Treat My OCD for anyone interested in learning more on social media, but I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, and my Instagram and TikTok are Dierdre Rae at Gmail, or at Gmail. I'm literally giving you my email. Deirdre Rae with like a little underscore, and it's like spelled Dierdre. It's not the proper Irish spelling, which, it
I
is what
love
it
it.
is.
I love it. Well, again, thank you guys so much for joining this event. The link is in the chat for you to book your free consultation call. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your Thursday. I thought today was Wednesday all day. So what a great surprise. All right. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Thank you, Deirdre. Bye.